Welcome back to week 5 of the head coach episode of Free Tendies Fantasy. I'm here with Yanni, and we are ready to do our fantasy game breakdowns. How's it going, man?
What's up, dude? Okay, first game on Thursday night. Kind of interesting as the news just broke that the Bears are considering firing Eberflus if they lose this one. You have the Bears at around a 20-point implied total coming back at the with the Commanders coming back at a 25-point implied total. For this game, you're starting Fields and more so because Moore's been so on fire the last few weeks. I know he had a little bit of a shaky start to the season, but I think you have to roll him out there. And this defense made Russell Wilson look like an all-star. Herbert had a really nice showing last week. It's hard to tell how real that is because it was against such a poor defense, but the idea is they clearly want to feed. I mean, that was the game where if Roshan was going to get a heavy workload, it would have happened. Clearly, Herbert for now is their preferred guy. So he's a tricky decision, but I think in a lot of rosters, especially if you have guys on bye, he's worth starting. It's a soft matchup. For the Commanders, they're playing the Bears. Roll out all your guys. Any guy that's on the edge, any guy you're thinking about, get him in your roster, get him going. I actually expect a big Brian Robinson game. He's someone I'm probably looking at captaining on DraftKings. Sam Howell, all of them. Terry should have a great game. It's a garbage defense. They're at home. I expect good things out of the team.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't have anything to add, really. Start all your Commanders. If Sam Howell looks bad in this one, I'm worried.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say. All right, next we got the Jagwires versus the Bills in London. The Jagwires have a implied team total of 21.5 points, and the Bills have an implied team total of 27 points. We had some deliberation about this one before pressing the record button on the Jagwires, and we decided ETN is going to be a start this week, and then Christian Kirk pending whether or not Zay Jones plays. I haven't really looked at the injury report this week, so I don't know if Zay is trending towards playing or not. But with Zay Jones out of the lineup, our favorite handcuff wide receiver, Christian Kirk, has been doing really good. He's even outproduced Calvin Ridley. He's been like the go-to guy on the short intermediate stuff. He's even had a couple long balls. So we're okay throwing him out there. We don't have anyone just as a straight up sit, and then our STDs for this one for the Jagwires are the Prince that was promised, Calvin Ridley, and Zay Jones if he goes. So this one's a little weird. Trevor Lawrence, obviously, he came into the season. Everybody was kind of on board that he was already elite. And after a good week 1 against the Colts, who we now know like just aren't the best pass defense, he's looked shaky since then. And the Bills, they just lost Tre'Davious White, so they are a little bit weaker defending the pass than they were last week for sure. But Trevor's still been shaky, man. I don't know. If you have a better option, like you could roll them out, but we don't have him like as just as a flat out start. Calvin Ridley, his trajectory has been the exact same as Trevor's. He was great week 1 against that bad Colts pass defense, and ever since then, I think he's caught like 7 balls in 3 games. He got bailed out on Sunday morning with the long 30-yard touchdown catch, but it's been tough for him. So I mean, he's obviously very talented. I think that he'll go as Trevor goes, though. So we got him as a tricky decision, even though I'm sure you're going to want to put him in your lineup. I don't know. And then Zay Jones, if he goes, is a tricky decision. Just because we haven't seen the production that Kirk is having with Zay Jones. So, yeah, if all 3 of them are playing, it gets a little bit trickier. But it seems like Zay Jones was the preferred option in 2 wide receiver sets before he got hurt. So it's a tough one to say. But, yeah, STD for him. Then for the Bills, we're starting Josh Allen, the fantasy quarterback 1. Stephon Diggs, the fantasy wide receiver 1, and James Cook. This Jaguars defense they're decent, but all those guys are studs. Just start them. Our tricky decision is Gabe Davis. That's another one that me and Yanni went back and forth on. So far, Gabe Davis has been playing way better probably than the position you drafted him in. So he's been a nice surprise, but we put him as a tricky decision because this is just Gabe Davis's game. He is the definition of boom or bust. He actually did have 6 grabs week 2 against the Raiders, but he's only had 2 career games where he's ever caught over 5 balls. So like you're kind of counting on something long and for him to get in the end zone for him to pay off. But yeah, like he's a STD I feel better about than like say for example Zay Jones. There's like tiers of our tricky decisions. So I just wanted to separate him out because I don't feel as great about him as the other three, but like still a pretty plus matchup for him. You got anything on this one, Yanni? You gonna get up at 6:30 in the morning and watch this too?
Yeah, absolutely. Dude, you only have like whatever, so many hundreds of football games before you die. Yeah, I'm real interested to see Calvin Ridley's usage. Usage is king, and he is not getting it right now. It's an interesting one to monitor.
Yeah,
that's all. Okay, Texans at Falcons. This one's going to be kind of interesting to see. You kind of have C.J. Stroud breaking out. I'm kind of surprised to see the implied total of around 19 points compared to the Falcons' implied total of 22. Very low-scoring game, according to Vegas. For your starts, I think right now, with the volume that they're coming out with, I think you're probably starting Stroud. In very many rosters, you're flexing Dell and Collins. Until one of them gets a clear hold, you might get a little nervous about hits or misses. There's a guy on Reddit, I wish I remembered his username. He does a great segment where he looks at what players being benched have cost guys the most games this year. And the number one player this year that has cost players the most wins by leaving him on your bench is Nico Collins. So I thought it was kind of interesting because I have him on a roster, and I've actually lost 2 games in that league for not starting Nico Collins over someone else in the flex. So, it's sort of an interesting thing worth monitoring. People don't seem to think very highly of him, but he's actually top 10 in a ton of important statistical categories. But Tank Dell also has looked fantastic in between, and he's one of the first read. There's a comparison when you look at who's getting the first read routes in that offense, and for 2 weeks straight, it was Dell. Last week, Collins took back over. I really think with the volume, though, he can sustain them both, and they're both perfectly fine starts this week. Pierce is a tricky decision. Obviously, you're not thrilled with him based on where you drafted him. He's been going around the 3-4 turn, or he went around the 3-4 turn in most of the drafts I did. Kind of had a good couple weeks here. He's looked a lot better, but they have a ton of injured O-linemen again. The Falcons are a legitimate defense. It's going to be tough sledding for him, I think. For the Falcons, the only Falcon you're comfortably starting at this point is Bijan. I don't know how you could say you're comfortable starting anyone else. We kind of alluded to it in our front office episode earlier this week. If Heineke gets in there, all of a sudden you're looking at London and you're looking at Pitts differently. But for now, you're not rolling him out. Algier is one to keep an eye on more as a DFS play this week. I just think with how soft their defense is and with the potential to be playing with a lead, Algier will get some looks this week. Super cheap on DraftKings. Definitely someone I'm going to be looking at.
Yeah. For me, Bijan looked really good last week in the limited touches he had, so it makes me think Arthur Smith might go back to Algier this week just because. Yeah. But we'll see.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, next we got the Panthers going into Detroit to play the Lions. The Panthers have an implied team total of about 18 points, and the Lions have an implied team total of 27. We have no starts for you on the Panthers. It's a putrid offense. We hate them. Our sits are Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard, and our only guy who's not just a flat-out sit is Adam Thielen. He's like... I guess it's almost Halloween. He's just like a football-playing skeleton. He's so old, but, with all the other trash on the Panthers offense, like, he's been the target monster. So, fire him up. I don't think he gets in the end zone, but I could see a 5 for 62 line here for him, which will be fine in PPR. For the Lions, we're starting Amon-Ra, we're starting Laporta Potty, we're starting David Montgomery, and we're starting Jared Goff. This Panthers team, even though they have a solid, they in theory have a solid D-line with Brian Burns and Derek Brown, they have not been able to stop the run. They have not been able to stop the pass. They really haven't been able to stop anything. So all the premium weapons in the Lions offense, start them. And then our sad, tricky decision is Jahmyr Gibbs. He's like a homeless man on the corner just begging for touches. He's got his little coffee cup out there. He's jiggling the coins. He's just like, please give me more than 5 touches. Please give me 15 to 20 touches. But MCDC loves David Montgomery. So until we see Gibbs getting featured and looking good, tricky decision just based on the talent alone. I hate the usage for him. You got anything on this one, Yanni? Your second team?
Nope. Equally sad about Gibbs, though. Yeah. Complete waste so far this year. All right. Should be actually kind of a fun divisional game. You have the Titans at around 20 points playing at the Colts with an implied total of around 22. For the Titans, they really are not the most exciting team this year, so there's not a whole lot to say. You're starting Derrick Henry. Tricky decisions, Hopkins, Burks, and Tannehill are more due to the Colts' extremely weak pass defense. They let up deep passes a lot, too, so Burks is kind of interesting. Again, probably more in DFS. I doubt your lineups are to the point where you're starting him this week, but maybe with buys or injuries or whatever. So Tannehill, Hopkins, Burks. Frankly, Hopkins has been extremely disappointing, too, this year. He's kind of to the point where I'm only starting him if I absolutely have to. Like, you're not rolling him out there and you're feeling good about it. He's going to get enough volume and maybe he'll get a touchdown, but the offense looks terrible. Tannehill looks terrible. Hopkins looks old. Not really someone you're excited to go out there, but again, their secondary is so bad in Indianapolis. You're thinking about it. For the Colts, you're starting the two studs, Pittman and Richardson. Pittman's volume's a little bit concerning. He's someone who might find himself on my sell high list depending on how this week goes. He's had three of the four halves of football he's played with Richardson. He's had little to no usage. He did end up breaking out at the second half of that first game they played together, but it is noteworthy to me that his usage seems pretty low. Garner throws to him a lot more, and we'll see. For now, though, he's a stud. He's going against a run funnel or pass funnel defense. You got to get him in your lineup. And then Richardson looks like a top 5 weekly upside fantasy quarterback. You're certainly starting him. The sits are a little interesting for this one. Moss has been pretty solid this year, and Jonathan Taylor is supposed to start practicing on Wednesday. So I would just say for now, they're going against what I consider the best, or if not the best, one of the best rush defenses in the NFL. They may split carries. You don't know what it's going to look like. They might hate Jonathan Taylor and just want him to sit on the sideline. I have no idea. Just too many unknowns. I'm probably sitting them both this week. And no tricky decisions for the Colts.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I would add onto that is Anthony Richardson and Michael Pittman showed up to the game last week in Step Brothers t-shirts. I am hammering that connection. Do not sell Michael Pittman. Don't listen to this guy. He hates Michael Pittman. He likes Chris Godwin better. Pittman, I'll call it right now. Pittman over 18 fantasy points, half PPR this week, and Richardson touches 30.
I mean, well, it's certainly possible. And again, he's a start for us this week. You know, it's like I'm not saying that. I'm saying keep an eye on the usage. He would have had a 2-point game last week if he didn't catch that 2-point conversion.
All right, next we have the Giants going into Miami to play the Dolphins. The Giants have an implied team total of 19.5 points, and the Dolphins have an implied team total of 30 points, which that's got to be the top one of the week, right?
That is the top one.
Our only start for you on the Giants is Saquon. He's the only Giant that has the potential to do anything, really, in my eyes. Tricky decisions are Waller and Wan'Dale Robinson. I like Waller a lot more as a tricky decision than I do Wan'Dale. I think Waller is still very talented. His issue is the guy who throws in the football stinks. So I don't know, maybe Dime starts to put it together a little bit more, but until then, no thank you. And then Wan'Dale, he's catching short stuff. I don't know. If you want a 4 for 32 and no touchdowns line, maybe Wan'Dale's your guy. I don't know. I don't like him. That was Moriarty's guy than me. For the Dolphins, we're starting everybody, including A-Chain and Mostert. It's kind of tough to say what's going on with this Miami backfield. To me, if I had to give a lean, I'm leaning A-Chain is going to start taking over, is the primary guy. But even if he does, I still see it being 60-40 or 50-50, and this Giants team is putrid. So I think him and Mostert can both get home in this. And then, Tua and Hill are smashes, and Jalen Waddle he's worthy of a start too.
Okay. Ravens at the Steelers this week. Ravens have an implied total of 21. Steelers have 17.5. I do believe this is the lowest implied point total of a game in Vegas this week, so they're not expecting much scoring. But for the Ravens, I think because the Steelers have looked pretty porous on defense, you're rolling out your studs, Lamar, Andrews, Flowers. A tricky decision and then ranging to sits is just Melvin Gordon. I don't start him for any reason. But their backfield's kind of tricky. I mean, the Steelers actually have a very soft rush defense. You just don't know which one's going to go off, and they've each kind of come in and out of the lineup with injuries or with getting late call-ups from the practice squad. I'm just sort of leaving that alone for now until I see. Certainly, if you want to throw some darts in DFS, I mean, if you have to start one, you're probably starting Gus. I do think one of them will have a good game. It's just hard to say which. And for the Steelers, pretty straightforward. You're starting almost nobody. Youth is out 2 to 3 weeks. Deontay's still injured. Their quarterback's injured. It's really a wreck on offense. Najee had an okay week last week, actually. It looked pretty good. But I wouldn't start him this week if you can avoid it. The only guy that I would consider is Pickens, just based on what the game script should look like. Trubisky will probably throw him a few deep balls, 50-50 balls, see what he can do. But I don't have a lot of investment on the Steelers offense, and I don't think anyone should.
All right, next we got New Orleans going into New England to play the Patriots. The Saints have an implied team total of about 20 points, and the Patriots are at about 21 points. Our only start this week for the Saints is Kamara. Our just flat-out sit is Carr. And our tricky decisions are Olave and Thomas. I felt pretty big brain last week when I called the Olave bad game. I didn't think he'd be that bad, but I kind of had a feeling that it wasn't going to be his game. And so this year I've watched 3 out of the 4 weeks I've watched an entire Saints game. So I've seen entirely too much Saints this year. And last week it was so obvious that even though Derek Carr, he's very tough to even be able to not miss a single game from an AC joint sprain. Like, he is struggling right now to push the ball down the field, to make throws. It's just brutal for him in the entire offense. So we have Olave and Thomas in his tricky decisions just because, like, there is a very real possibility that Carr has another, 150-yard passing game, even against this banged-up Patriots secondary. Like, I probably, even if Christian Gonzalez was playing, I probably wouldn't have either Olave or Thomas as, flat-out sits, but yeah, I'd like to see Carr look better first before we can fire those guys up again as locked and loaded in your lineups. The Patriots, nobody's a start. Our tricky decisions are Ramondre and Zeke. They split the backfield 50-50 and are equally talented. And we're sitting everybody else. It's just for the I don't actually think Zeke is as talented as Ramondre. But it's just a
point of contention.
Yeah.
It's a point of contention.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Here, I kind of like Ramondre as a buy low. I really, truly do. And I was down on him this year, pre-draft. But it's just because he was going in the 4th round. I thought that was insane. And, I'm probably a very irrational Patriots hater here. But so far, early returns are looking good for old Teddy Boy's episode 1 prediction that they would stink. I think I said 5 or 6 wins and Bill quits. I mean, you think the Patriots get 6 wins this year, Yanni? I think they'll be hard pressed.
I have to look at their schedule, but they don't feel like a 7-win team. So it's either 5 or 6 probably, if I had to guess. It's brutal, man. They just had the worst loss of the Bill Belichick era.
Yeah.
Okay, Bengals at Cardinals. Bengals with an implied total that I felt was far too high at 24 points. Cardinals at about 21 points. For the Bengals, man, one of the most disappointing fantasy offenses this year. An offense that I think a lot of people had pretty heavy buy-in on. 3 guys going in the top 36 picks. Joe Burrow, who's going anywhere from 35 to 55 in most drafts. Extremely high in expert consensus rankings. I think we're all kind of bummed out with how this year's gone. Jamar Chase currently is 6th in the NFL in targets, and he's the wide receiver 28. So, and he went 2 or 3 in almost every draft. So, I mean, it's really disappointing. I think for this week, though, you're starting Mixon and Chase pretty much every week based on where you drafted him. The odds of you having a roster where those guys are valid sits is pretty low. But until Joe comes back all the way, you don't feel great about either one. You're sitting in that vein, Burrow and Higgins. I mean, Higgins is injured, and it should not be the kind of game. I don't envision it being a shootout game, and I don't think Joe's capable of shooting out right now. And same reason you're benching Joe Burrow. In one league where I do have Joe Burrow, I will be starting Dobbs over him. So that's where I'm at with Joe Burrow. Boyd, if Higgins sits, is a really interesting DFS play this week. I think he actually could do pretty well, especially with Joe's calf being garbage and him throwing not very, very well in the deep balls. For the Cardinals, you're starting Dobbs, you're starting Connor, you're starting Brown. Dobbs was one I was so happy to put him in a start this week. He was on my list of waiver wire targets. And looking over his last 3 weeks, he's played 2 extremely high-end defenses and been very productive. He's actually been a pretty productive player for the last 3 weeks. He had a dud game his first week, but he's coming off cold off a practice squad. I think they signed him like 10 days before the season started. He really looks like he's coming into his own. He's actually got his guys going. And for that reason, Connor and Brown are starts too. Your tricky decisions are going to be Zach Ertz because he does see the volume, and depending on what your roster looks like and with how bad some of the higher drafted tight ends have looked, you probably do want to take a look, especially in PPR at him. Wilson, his name is Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson came out last week against a pretty stout Niners defense. They aren't always the best against the run. They have trouble with real quick guys, but came out and had a really productive game. 7 targets, 7 catches, 2 touchdowns, I think around 75 yards. It did look like a breakout game of sorts. And just in general, that offense and the passing games looked real competent. So he's one that you can certainly take a look at again, probably more so in DFS. I don't know how many people would be starting him this week, but he's worth a shout, man. He looks great.
Yeah. Definitely love the Dobbs call out. Like, man, as much as we love to meme Gannon coming into this year, like he has the Cardinals playing hard, man. He has them playing really well. Everybody pegged them as probably the worst team in the league, like by far.
Oh yeah.
And it's so clear they're not that. So I mean, tip your cap to them. I'm happy that they're playing well like that.
Yeah.
And then I guess my other comment on this game would be, with Joe Burrow looking the way that he does, he's clearly not there yet, right? Like, I wonder if Zach Taylor starts just trying to workhorse the shit out of Mixon, like make him like a Derrick Henry, like for this game. The Cardinals have had trouble stopping the run all year, and man, if your quarterback can't do it, why not give Joe a little bit more work? I believe last week against the Titans, he averaged 5 yards a carry, which nobody does that against the Titans. Joe has been fine, when they give him the ball, but it's just great. They're just so. It's so confusing. If your quarterback is that inefficient and that hurt and killing your team, why don't you just hand it off? Give him a break, man. Jeez.
Again, a reason why he's been on my buy low list, I think for 2 weeks, but he was certainly on last week. I don't know if I put him on 2 weeks ago. Dude, he's seeing over 70% of his team snaps out of the backfield. And the offense has been bad, and he hasn't been great this year, but he's at least been startable. Like, he hasn't destroyed your team. He's someone I would certainly look at buying low if you can. I think later in the year, you're going to see an excellent return on that investment.
All right, next we got the Philadelphia Eagles going into LA to play the Rams. The Eagles have an implied point total of 28 points, and the Rams have about 23 points implied. Our starts for the Eagles this week are Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and the champion of the Eagles backfield, DeAndre Swift. Our tricky decisions, Dallas Goedert. Man, that's a bummer for me. I've had him 2 years in a row. I was so excited to get Goddard in the 7th round. I thought I was such a drafting savant, and it's just been a dud. It's just been a dud this year. Jalen doesn't look right to me, but he's still a start because, you got to. And then Kenny Gainwell is a DFS tricky decision. I'm not as on board with this one because I think this is just entire Swift ownership at this point. But Yanni, why is Kenny Gainwell a DFS to you?
One, he's still getting enough of the snap share that he's a relevant player in their offense. 2, they've shown the willingness to give him a heavy workload at different times, and this year they have at one point. And just 3, it's more a game script thing too. The Eagles are pretty good against the run. They're pretty good. They're not amazing. Kyron Williams came up with a hip injury this week. And I believe Stafford, I forget what his injury is, but he had an injury too. So I just view the Rams as kind of banged up right now. The Eagles are 4-0. They are rolling. I mean, they don't look right, but they look good. And I think the game script could favor Gainwell usage. They don't want to keep giving Swift, and Swift has his own injury problems. I doubt they want Swift handling 20 to 25 touches a game. And so the game script, the banged up injuries on the Rams, they get a good lead. I feel like Gainwell will work in this week. And with how cheap he is on DraftKings, again, he's someone I'm probably looking to play in a few lineups.
Yeah, that's fair for DraftKings. I don't really mess with DraftKings that much, so it's a little bit harder for me to like have an understanding of that. But what if I told you that DeAndre Swift had 70% of the work last week? Would that change your mind at all? Or are you still?
Well, I mean, it was I think 40 or 52 and 48% the week before. Then Swift jumped up to 70%, but that was an extremely competitive, high-scoring game. That was like a game where I would expect him to get workhorse, because that's like that usage is much more like a we need to win game, and it's a brutal, back and forth. I don't think this is going to be that kind of game. I think this is going to be a comfortable 10 to 14 point lead, and they ride it out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like I don't. It's maybe that's a bad prognostication on my part. The Rams have been really solid this year. It just looks like the Rams in general are trending toward becoming the team everyone thought they were in many ways. And the Eagles they're every week one would assume they're getting better. I mean, they're learning a new offense, they're learning a new defense. For a lot of reasons, I think they're going to kind of have a lead and be beaten up on the Rams a little bit. And to me, that means Gainwell will get usage. I think that usage last week is much more indicative of a razor-close game where they needed their best players on the field as much as possible. I don't think that's what they'd like to do, because Swift will get hurt. It's happened every time he's gotten a heavy workload, he gets injured. And they know that. So that's my thinking behind that.
Mr. 5-0 gambling last week may have a pick on this game. But that's a teaser. That's a teaser. We'll reveal that later. Okay, so for the Rams, our starts are Puka, Matt Stafford, Kyron Williams, and Cooper Kupp if he plays. This is the first week. Kupp can come off the IR. I think he's off the IR already. And
they opened his window. He's not off the IR, so they have 21 days to officially.
Okay, but yeah, Stafford I think has looked much better this season than I ever thought he did. Puka's just a monster on this team, so I figure, man, if Kupp gets in there, watch out. That could be a league winner. I would feel really, really good if you're a team and you drafted Kupp in like the 4th or 5th round of a draft, and you're sitting at like 2-2, 3-1. If you somehow made it through the first 4 weeks and you aren't like terribly behind at 0-4, I'd be really happy about having him on your team. It looks like he could be a smash. Our tricky decisions are Tutu Atwell and Tyler Higbee. Tutu Atwell is a tricky decision because we don't know if Kupp's going or not. If Kupp is not going, I would almost start Tutu, honestly. What do you think, Yanni? Like, is that an absolutely tricky decision no matter what? Or would you call him a start if Kupp doesn't play?
It'll be a game script that favors passing, I think. He's had a bit of a breakout, man. Tutu's actually looked great this year. Yeah. But if Kupp doesn't play, comfortably start him. And like Higbee too, they've both seen really good usage the last 2 or 3 weeks. And even though Tutu's dropped off a little bit, yeah, absolutely. With no Kupp, I think you're totally comfortable starting him.
Higbee had 10 targets last week. His usage finally started, like, I don't know. Like the first 3 weeks, it was kind of like he's getting 4 or 5 targets. He's getting you some fantasy points, but last week was like great tight end usage. So fire him up. This Eagles defense, the way they can be attacked is through the air. They're banged up right now. They're missing their middle linebacker as well. So I see the Rams having another good day at the office offensively in this one.
Okay, Chiefs at the Vikings should be one of the highest scoring games of the week. I think it's the second highest in implied total. Chiefs implied 29 points, Vikings around 23-24. For the Chiefs, you're starting Mahomes, you're starting Mr. Pfizer, as Aaron Rodgers called him, Travis Kelce, and then Pacheco. Pacheco has really taken over this backfield. He looks explosive. He's getting more receiving work than McKinnon. It's hard to say because they're so funky with how they allocate their touches in the backfield there. But it feels like Pacheco's getting full run and that he's their guy they've chosen. At least that's what it looks like to me from what I've seen. I would be extreme. If you're a Pacheco owner and you grabbed him in that running back dead zone, or even he was going in like 7th, 8th round in some drafts, you have to feel fantastic about that decision. And you're starting him this week against a soft defense in a high-scoring game. And then your tricky decisions here. CEH is more of a DFS play. Just if they get ahead or if they're on the goal line a bunch. Pacheco also had a hamstring. Maybe he takes plays off. I think CEH has seen enough touches that you're just sort of keeping an eye on him, and maybe you'll fit him into some rosters. McKinnon too, but less so. Sky Moore is a tricky decision. Again, probably more of a DFS thing. Probably not someone you're slamming in your lineup. But the Vikings are terrible on defense. They've let a million people go. And it does seem like of all the receivers, if I had to pick one, I know Rice has been kind of the hot pick or whatever. It seems like they try to manufacture touches for Moore. You know, he's worth taking a look. Your starts on the Vikings are your 3 chalk guys, Cousins, JJ Hawkinson. Cousins had a bad game last week. But that was really just a mess of a game. I don't know. I'm inclined to just say that was an outlier game. I wouldn't take it too seriously. His production this year has been fantastic. His passing attempts, his yardage. He had a bad game, but you're starting him this week, certainly. You're sitting Akers, even though he had a nice yards per carry. He had nice usage. And, you know, if you grabbed him off waivers, you're probably a little bit happy that he showed some signs of life. And then your tricky decisions. Addison is really seeing his workload eaten into. Osborne, for whatever reason, is one of those guys that at different points of the year, he always crops up relevant for a time, and this is that time. It was interesting, though, with how productive Addison had looked to see him take a step back. I'm not sure what prompted that. I'm not sure if it's an abnormal thing. But his usage is very different. It's something to keep an eye on. I don't think you should be throwing him in your lineup right now, but in such a high-scoring game, he's someone, if you have to flex, you're comfortable doing so. And then Madison. The Chiefs have actually been pretty good about allowing points to fantasy running backs. Good in the sense that they don't allow a lot of points to fantasy running backs. And then you have Akers cutting into his workload. So he's not a clear start. He's not a bench either. I think in most rosters, you're going to fire him up this week. And he's coming off of a good week. But he's a tricky decision. You know, there might be better options you have. Would you rather start Madison this week or Nico Collins?
Nico Collins by far.
Okay. Would you rather start?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think this is a tough one for Madison. Like, this isn't going to be good, I don't think, for him.
Okay. Would you rather start Gabe Davis or Madison?
Gabe Davis.
Would you rather start Addison or Madison?
Addison.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're really low.
So,
I would have.
Well, that kind of leads me into what I wanted to say about this game. The way that the KJ Osborne and Jordan Addison usage has been split up thus far, it reminds me a lot of like the Swift and Gainwell stuff that was happening with the Eagles earlier. I think that the only reason KJ Osborne is getting the snaps that he is like he just has money in the bank with the Vikings for being there for a little bit longer. You know, like they're making the rookie like earn it. But Jordan Addison, like take last week out of it. Kirk was very bad last week, and it was a weird, disgusting game. Like, Jordan Addison, when he's on the field, he makes an impact, like, for sure. And I think this Vikings team, if they're serious about trying to, like, win football games, or in this one with the Chiefs, they're going to have to score to keep up with this team, because their defense isn't good. So I think that at a certain point, they're just going to start giving Addison the full run. It's just a matter of when. I think absolutely he's massively talented, and, yeah, that's why I like Addison more than Madison in this one. And then I guess the other thing is Pacheco. Like, I didn't realize you were that bought in on him. Like, really, you think he's like... I think that last week against the Jets was more of like just the way the Jets defense is. The Jets defense like has this way of just confounding quarterbacks. Like, it seems to me like teams that when you play the Jets, the way to do well against the Jets is to like just run the ball at them, because they have Sauce Gardner, right? And a lot of their guys on the defensive line, they aren't like really run stuffers so much as like pass rushers. So I think that just like all of these teams that have good quarterbacks that go against the Jets, I almost want to fade them going forward. Like, I don't want to set that in stone yet. I don't think it's not like the Titans defense where I just know it, right? But I definitely have my eyes on that. So I think that Pacheco might have just been recipient of like what the game was. It's just that, like, with the Vikings, like, they've had pretty good success so far stopping running backs, and they send the blitz all the time. So I don't know. I still like him as a start. I don't disagree with that, but I don't know. I don't love him, but that's just my thought on it. Are you, like, sold as Pacheco being, like, a guy going forward?
Based on the fact that he was recovering from an injury and his usage dipped, right? So the two big factors for Pacheco that kill me are, why is McKinnon getting so much of the red zone work, and why does he never get receptions? In both accounts, his usage has taken a drastic tick up these last 2 weeks, and you're seeing RB1 numbers being put up. So to me, that's not accidental. That is like an organizational shift, at least for 2 weeks. Maybe it doesn't hold up. I'm not saying, like, you go all in on the guy. If that usage holds, though, with this offense and with their garbage receivers, Pacheco will be a league winner this year, dude. If he's getting receiving work like that and he's getting the bulk of the red zone work and they're workhorsing him to some degree, as much as the Chiefs are workhorse a running back. The issue was always that it was split up. And then he did weird shit like that stupid shovel pass to make it. He loves that stuff. And it's cool. It's fun to watch, but it's terrible for fantasy owners. It looks like more and more they're just kind of letting Pacheco handle things in a lot of these situations. And of course that raises his ceiling drastically. Dude, again, we just don't know. It's hard to make a, trend off of 2 weeks, but him going from injured to healthy, one would assume he got healthy. That was the change that occurred. And for them to really be treating him as like a featured back, of course, I think that's thing. Dude, he was going like pick 85 a lot of drafts, 85, 90, 75, 80. It looks like that was a really good gamble for people who took that shot on him.
So we've got a league winner call on him. I never would have thought that. I guess we'll see. I don't know. Like, I said this last week, like, I really just check out of, like, the Chiefs running game. I don't think I've watched a single Chiefs game this year. I even fell asleep at halftime. I fell asleep before halftime on the Sunday night game. I think it was like 17-2, and I fell asleep on my couch, and I knew Yanni had picked the Chiefs to cover. And then I woke up and it was 20-20, and I was like, what happened?
So in the last 2 weeks against Chicago, we had 15 carries, a rushing touchdown, and 3 targets. So that's 18 opportunities. Last week against the Jets, he had 20 rushes for 115, a touchdown, 3 targets, 43 yards receiving, 3 receptions. So, like, if you're on the Chiefs offense and you're getting up in that 18 to 25 use range, including targets out of the backfield, yeah, dude, I'm extremely high on him. I'm really upset that I was kind of someone I felt around with offers on the last few weeks, but no one bit, and that's over. Now people are just telling me to F off. So, yeah. Fair enough.
We'll see. Yeah. I'm still not sold on him yet, to be honest. But we'll see.
Yeah, he's a 6th-round running back, dude. That's, it's not a bad thing to be cautious about. Okay, next game, and what should be a barn burner. Shout out Bill Burr. The Jets, 20 and a half points, coming back at the Broncos, 23 points. For the Jets, I think the only person you're comfortably starting, and really it's not even comfortable, but he's been productive enough. I think you probably want to be fitting him into your lineups, is Garrett Wilson, especially against a bad defense, is Garrett Wilson. We had I don't know if it was a heated discussion, but we had a back and forth about what to do with Hall and Zach Wilson. Maybe it's just an ego thing, or maybe it's just a recency bias. I don't know what it is. I think Zach Wilson's going to have a great week this week. Ted probably smartly talked me out of planting a flag on that one. So we have him as a tricky decision. It's a garbage defense, man. He looked really good last week. Anyway, you're probably only doing this in super flex leagues, but take a look at Zach Wilson this week. And then Hall and Dalvin, it's just a matter of this defense is so bad, and running backs have had so much production against them. Personally, obviously, you feel way better starting Hall than Dalvin, but both of these guys will probably do all right this week, I would assume. If they don't do all right this week, that's kind of when you're panicking. Hall's recovery window should have shown that he's at about 95% recovered by week 5. So the timeline, there was this line of demarcation when you watch a lot of fantasy content gears towards the injury side. You have the doctors, fantasy doctors or whatever, whoever, Brian Suter. These guys like to talk about what these recovery timetables look like. And the big week for Hall was around week 5, that he was supposed to be close to 100%. He won't be 100% this year, but around week 5. So I'm watching this week intently. It's against a bad defense. He broke off that nice 40-yarder last week that was really encouraging to see. Certainly keep your eye on Hall this week. For the Broncos, I don't think you're starting anyone against the Jets. They're kind of a messy defense, man. They've stuffed Mahomes. They've stuffed Josh Allen. Like Ted was saying, they do have Sauce Gardner. One would assume that he'll lock up either Sutton or Judy. And for that reason, you're sitting Russell Wilson. You're sitting the rest of them, except for two guys that I think are worth a shout this week. McLaughlin, if Javonte sits, this has been pending Javonte sitting. If he's their lead back, if they're checking it down to him, he was extremely efficient last week. He looked a lot better than their other guys have looked all year, than anyone's looked in that backfield all year. Someone to keep an eye on. And then Mims. This one was Ted threw this one in there for me, which I very much appreciate. I love this kid. He's Ted calls him my like fantasy man crushes. I get on this hype for a guy and I keep rooting for him for the whole year. I don't know why. It's probably a mildly autistic thing I do. But Mims is cool, man. He's been super effective with his touches. Super effective. And if Sauce is locking up their number one and DJ Reed is locking up their number two, look for Mims to break out this week. Maybe. Probably more of a DFS thing. Probably only strictly a DFS thing, but keep an eye on it. Make sure you go and grab him off those waivers if he does. If he has a good week this week, I mean, who knows? He might be looking at, he's had about 40 points the last 3 weeks, barely getting any touches. If he has a good week this week and all of a sudden you're looking at 50, 60 points over 4 weeks, you're looking at a low-end wide receiver one, at least in points per game for a month. That becomes really interesting. He's just someone to keep an eye on. He's someone I'm rooting for. I think the kid's fantastic to watch. He's electric. So he's a tricky decision along with McLaughlin.
It absolutely would not shock me if Marvin Mims goes one catch for 67 yards and a touchdown, like 14 fantasy points, and we have the same conversation next week. I think we're doomed to do this for the entire year. But man, it might as well throw a dart on him, right? He's like the new Robbie Anderson. He's like young Robbie Anderson. I'm very excited. Like
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
How about this? I'll give you a different comparison. His archetype is a Tyreek Hill archetype. He doesn't have a Patrick Mahomes throwing it to him. He doesn't have a Tua throwing it to him. But and again, he's not one of the all-time greatest receivers like Hill is. But his archetype is that level guy. He's an explosive weapon. If he were playing with Mahomes, he'd be a wide receiver one.
We said the same thing about Kadarius Toney, though, remember?
We didn't say the same thing about Kadarius Toney. No.
I remember the fantasy community just loved Toney to the Chiefs last year.
I didn't. I don't like that guy. I don't think he's a good person. Kadarius Toney's not no. But fair enough. We'll see.
All right, next we got the game of the week, Sunday night. We got the Cowboys coming to Levi's to play the Niners. The Cowboys have an implied team total of about 21, and the Niners have an implied team total of about 24 points. Our starts for the Cowboys are CD, Tony Pollard, and Jake Ferguson. Welcome to the start club, dude. I think last week he had 7 targets, 70 yards. Like, in a position as dry as tight end, it seems like the Cowboys like him. Like, he's approaching Dalton Schultz level to me. Like, man, good call on Yanni. Calling him out is like a week 1 pickup. I think like time has proven like that week 1 like waiver wire is like the most important one. I think there's so many guys that just don't belong on waivers. And so, I mean, lesson learned. If you're playing in a fab league, it's not always bad to blow your wad early. Tricky decision is Dak here. This one really is tricky to me. Like, I feel like maybe we overuse it, but it's necessary. This one it confounds me. So the Niners so far on defense have allowed teams to like throw on them quite a bit. Daniel Jones is the only one of the quarterbacks who didn't really find any success, but Josh Dobbs dropped back 47 times on Sunday, passed for 265 and 2 touchdowns. Week 2, Matthew Stafford dropped back like 50 times. He had great success getting Puka the ball and all that stuff. And then week 1, Kenny stinks. So I don't know. I mean, Dak could have some success here. It seems like if the Niners are going to be attacked, it's at the corner position, and he has weapons to do it. But at the same time, it's Dak. You know, like 2-3 interceptions is not out of the question either, especially with ball hawks like Hufanga. You know, just they can absolutely ruin a play. So I wouldn't love to start him here, but I wouldn't hate it either. It really just depends on your roster. Then for the Niners, this one's a little easier, I would say. CMC, Ayuk, and Debo. Like, this is a great defense in the Cowboys, but fire them up. Those guys are so good. Like, you just have to do it. Don't have any just flat out sits, and our tricky decisions are Brock Purdy and George Kittle.
Yep.
I almost wanted to put Purdy as just a flat out start here. I think he's just listen. The kid's proved it time and time again. Undefeated as a starter. He had one incompletion last week. Everything seems to be firing on all cylinders. Like, it finally feels right for this Niners team. But at the same time, like, this Cowboys team made him look human last year in the playoffs. So I get it. On that tricky decision, I'm almost leaning towards you could just go ahead and start him, though. And then George Kittle, he just hasn't been getting the targets this year. I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know if it's just because there's all these weapons and he just kind of found himself not getting the work that he used to. I think he's still just as good of a football player. It's just like, it seems like he's liable to have the opportunities go somewhere else. So we just have him as a tricky decision instead of a flat-out start. You got anything on this one, Yanni?
No, it kills me to have Kittle as a tricky decision. I got him in one league in round 7, and same thing you said with Goddard. I was like, oh my God, I'll take Kittle in round 7, especially with how much Brock looked for him in the end zone last year. I think that ankle injury is still bothering him a little bit. I think it's worth noting, per our personal discussion, I believe the 2 games that Ayuk and Debo have been on the field together, Ayuk has 300 yards, 3 or 4 touchdowns, like 15 receptions, and Debo hasn't scored 10 points in those 2 games combined. So as far as what's going on so far, it looks like when they're on the field together, it's clearly that Ayuk's their alpha and Debo's a second thought in the offense. I just wanted to make sure to get that on video, and it is measurably true. Ayuk has missed a game this year, and he's still outscoring Debo Samuel. And Debo's played 4 games. Ayuk's played 3. And he only played 2.5. He played 1 game injured.
Hold on. I'm pulling it up. Because, Ayuk, like, against the Cardinals, there were only 2 guys that mattered. It was all CMC and Ayuk, without a doubt.
Debo, I believe, had an 8.9 point game and 0.6 points, and Ayuk had like 28 and 24.
Yeah, Debo didn't get a target. Debo didn't get a target against the Cardinals.
Yep. He's a second string running back making $24.5 million a year.
I can't believe you said that about our guy, Debo.
You know what I love doing, by the way? I could have talked to you about this off camera and given you a chance to get ready. And I was like, I'm doing this right now. It's like I've been sitting on it for a month.
Listen, man, it's a young season. It's a young season. I mean, Debo was trending towards not playing this week, and then got out there. So I don't know. Here's the deal. Even though we argue about this, like, this is a great 1-2 wide receiver punch, man. Like, listen, if you're gonna be a wide receiver 2, like on this team, I'll take it.
Yeah. Shit. It's a great problem to have. Yeah. So that's the only thing about the game is I would just say you are on a little bit of Debo watch, a little bit. Dude, in 3 games, he has, to score less than 10 points combined in the 2 games he's played with Ayuk is very noteworthy, in my opinion. And who knows how healthy he is. The other thing is just on Pollard real quick. He's coming off a tightrope surgery. A lot of the docs that I checked out, 1 said he might not be 100% all year, but that seems a little extreme. He's looked productive enough. But 2 said expect like 6 to 8 weeks into the season for him to be 100%. So don't panic if you're a Pollard owner. Maybe buy low on him this year. He has not. He hasn't looked great. He hasn't looked as good as what you're hoping for, and that other kid's eaten into his workload a little bit. But I still believe in Pollard. That's all I have to add to the game.
That's so weird. Like, because I have Pollard in 2 leagues. I haven't even been worried about him. I thought he's been great. So, are there managers that are worried about Tony Pollard? Like, is that real?
Yeah, I've noticed his backups getting picked up in a lot of places. I've noticed that his owners have actually been willing to deal him when I've asked him about him.
Wow.
And just he's been sliding down a little bit on that overall fantasy ranking, list this season. Again, I don't think so. I just think that people were expecting him to be like, whatever, a league winner, whatever that means. But I am saying that in my opinion, and at least in the opinion of some of the medical fantasy guys I follow, he's not even at 100% yet. I would expect him to have a fantastic second half of the season.
That's so funny. I was so happy with Pollard. Like, I think it's because the one team I have him on, he was like a 10th round keeper for me, and like You know, he's been playing well. It's in a 14-team league. So I'm like, he gets me 17 points. I'm happy as a clam. I'm like, sweet. But
dude, his red zone, between the red zone usage and just the overall usage, he's absolutely elite. He's one of like the 5 or 6 most valuable fantasy assets, in my opinion. But just thought that was worth throwing out there. Don't panic on him. He's going to be just fine.
Fair enough. All right.
Okay, Packers at the Raiders. Probably a game I'm going to be looking at in my bets this week. Packers with a 23-point implied total. Raiders around 21-22. Jimmy should be back this week, one would assume. Just a quick overarching thing about this game. The Raiders are a fucking mess this year. What a wreck, man. You have players that are liking tweets about get me out of here and fire McDaniel. Devontae's agent, I guess it wasn't officially, but I think Devontae's agent put out a list of, hey, here's where you can send me when this thing falls apart. Josh Jacobs said, I'm tired of losing. Max Crosby just looks sad all the time. I don't know if that's just a general demeanor thing. But every time I see him, he looks sad. You had one of the best podcasts, 3 and Out with John Middlecoff. He's a rising stud. He's getting all this play on Colin Cowherd's Volume Network. Certainly go check him out. He's worth your time. He was asking, like, do you think they'll trade Crosby for a couple ones this year and try to move him? Who knows if they go into a fire zone? The Raiders are a mess, and I think it does affect this game. Is just the general negativity. Jimmy is a franchise destroying force as a human being. It's interesting. So your starts. Jordan Love, AJ, Dobbs. Dobbs has actually been like a low-end wide receiver too this year. Not low-end, excuse me, like a mid-range wide receiver too that pushes into the almost high-end wide receiver two range. Kind of shocking, even with Watson back last week. It feels to me like he's a safety blanket of sorts for Love. He really likes him, and I think against the soft defense, you're rolling him out. AJ was coming back off his hamstring injury. He should be fine. He had 25.7 points, half PPR his first week this year, and then he got the hamstring. It's going to take him a little bit to get back up to speed, but he'll be fine. You're starting him. For your tricky decisions, you have Watson. Just because of the hamstring injury, he would be a start for me, but I don't know if he was 100% last week. I think you just kind of got to give it a week to see. A lot of rosters, you're probably starting him. And then Musgrave, if he plays, I believe is a start, but he's in concussion protocol, so that lands him in our tricky decisions. For the Raiders, Jacobs and Adams, your 2 studs. You're starting them every week, obviously. Even if Jacobs hasn't looked great, he did have his first real game of the season last year where you kind of saw what you were hoping when you drafted him, and you're certainly starting him again this week. You're sitting old Jimmy Garoppolo. I hope you're not ever starting him, but I guess in some super flex leagues, you're taking a look at him. I would not start him this week. And then your tricky decision is Myers. He has enough of a rapport with Jimmy. He gets enough play, enough shot to catch a touchdown in the end zone, especially in full PPR. You'll find your way into a lot of lineups. You might not find your way in others, but for that reason, he's a tricky decision. And that's it for that game, unless you have anything to add to it.
I just got one fun fact. Josh Jacobs has more receiving yards than rushing yards this year.
Yeah, I think he's averaging under 2 yards a carry too, right? Or like maybe bump that up this week. He was under 2 yards a carry for a while this year.
Yeah, I don't know how many yards per carry he has, but it's been tough for him and all other Raiders. Prayers up. I mean, who could have seen Jimmy Garoppolo not being the quarterback that you paid and we're excited about?
Yep.
Anyways,
and missing games.
Oh wait, what was
missing
that?
game and missing games. He has missed 25% of his games as a Raider so far.
Shocking. As Niners fans, we never saw it coming. He was such a winner.
Keeping the legacy going. Keeping the legacy.
All right, that's going to do it for us this week. If you made it through the whole video, thank you. Please like, subscribe, and what'll be today's comment this week? Oh, I got one. Do you think that the Travis Kelce Taylor Swift relationship is fake and being used to push Pfizer vaccines? Let us know in the comments if you think that it's all a giant hoax. All right.
We'd love to hear.
We'll catch you on Saturday for the gambling episode.